Hi, my name is Father Brian Jordan, a member of Holy Name Province for over 36 years. Last year I published a book called The Ground Zero Cross. It's simply a memoir of my experiences as a result of the terrible tragedy of September 11, 2001. The book is about a sacred icon. It was a T-beam that was discovered September 13, 2001 by a union construction worker named Franciscan. But when it fell, as a result of the terrible tragedy on September 11th, it came from a 25-degree angle. An insulation on the left-hand side resembled the Shroud of Turin. So Frank believed that this was a sacred moment. And 10 days later, Frank Selech invited me to look at what we call God's house, and I witnessed and saw this sacred icon for the first time. It resembled a cross. It was in the midst of ruin and rubble. But it was a profound meaning and purpose that we believe that God never abandoned us at ground zero. This was a sacred icon, a sacred sign that God is with us, this form, what we interpret to be a cross. A couple weeks later, on October 4th, 2001, we had a blessing ceremony on the corner of West and Vesey Street. On the top of a concrete abutment, we had the Ground Zero Cross placed up there. I did a blessing ceremony from the words of St. Bonaventure, and also accompanied by a firefighter, a police officer, a Port Authority officer, a construction worker, such as Frank Selech. And in the presence of 400 people who witnessed this sacred ceremony, we blessed the Ground Zero Cross. And we chose October 4th because it's the feast of St. Francis. And St. Francis is known as the patron saint of ecology. So this was sacred ground. All of those 16 acres of that area that was attacked by those misguided terrorists, this was sacred ground where nearly 3,000 people died on that fateful, tragic day. We blessed not only the concrete, not only the sacred icon of the cross, I blessed the ground as well. I even blessed the animals, the search dogs who were there, because St. Francis is also the patron saint of animals. Not only were the masses attended by the recovery workers, the uniformed services, construction workers, Salvation Army, and other volunteer agencies, many family members, and not just from the United States, but family members from all over the world showed up. Because this wasn't just an American tragedy, this was an international tragedy. Over 80 nations lost loved ones on that day. Therefore, I believe it's an international tragedy. The misguided terrorists purposely chose the World Trade Center. Not the American Trade Center, the World Trade Center. So this was an attack of democracy in our world. But even though they achieved somewhat their purpose on that day, September 11th, our strong resolve, both as Americans and members of the international community, is that evil will not triumph. The goodness of Almighty God will always triumph. And that was exhibited and evidenced by the presence, by the visible Ground Zero Cross. The cross remained there from October 4th, 2001 till February 14th, 2002. February 14th, 2002, on Valentine's Day, we transferred the cross from West and Vesey Street to the other side of the sacred ground on Church and Cortlandt Street, nearby we call the Century 20 store right there. And again, as we did the first time, this was the donated work, free work done by the construction workers. All the material was donated by the union contractors who owned the company, so not a nickel or a dime was spent by anyone. That was all donated material as well as donated work and labor to recertify and to rebuild the Ground Zero Cross on Church and Courtland Street. And it stayed there for over 5 years. The most probably important Mass among many, there are many Masses on there, Midnight Mass, Easter Sunday, St. Patrick's Day, and many others. But one of the most important Masses was on Mother's Day, on the second Sunday of May in 2002. At a time when nearly over 400 people were there, and many mothers who lost sons and daughters were there, many grandmothers were there, many godmothers. And some of these mothers and grandmothers were also wives of those who lost loved ones. And they were there, and they were looking for meaning and purpose. And union construction workers make sure they give flowers to each of the mothers, grandmothers, and godmothers that day. During the time of the Kiss of Peace, which is part of the liturgy we had every year, a group of special forces, United States Special Forces, came upon the cross. I invited them to join us for the Kiss of Peace. And then it occurred to me, by an act of God, an act of spontaneity, whatever you want to say, I said, U.S. Special Forces, if you need incentive, what are you fighting for? Because these men were about to be sent over to Afghanistan. Look at the faces of these mothers, grandmothers and godmothers who lost loved ones, who are grieving today on Mother's Day. And mothers, grandmothers, and godmothers, if you want to see a sense of hope that your sons and your grandsons and your godsons did not die in vain, these brave soldiers are about to go to Afghanistan to repel and reduce and dismiss the influence of Al-Qaeda. Lo and behold, I've never seen in all my 35 years as a priest, and it was present day, the mothers, godmothers, grandmothers, and the U.S. Special Forces all converge in one another. And it wasn't a handshake, kiss of peace. They actually embraced each other, tears running down their eyes. These tough soldiers and these beautiful women embracing each other. It was the longest kiss of peace ever seen in my life. It was about 7 minutes. And that's a long time for a kiss of peace in a Mass. And it was beautiful. Hallmark, Hollywood, no novelist could come up with a better sight than what I saw that day. And to this very day, it was the most precious Mother's Day Mass I've ever presided over in my life. And that was including the book as well. After a while, the Port Authority asked us if we could relocate the cross briefly off-site during the time of the rebuilding process at Ground Zero. And we agreed to do so at a neutral site, and we did it on the outside wall of St. Peter's Church. And we decided because that church was used as a temporary morgue, with the bodies of my good fellow Franciscan Michael Judge, Pete Gansey, Bill Feehan, and wonderful others who served as firefighters, personnel and leadership, and police officers. The bodies were put into the Church of St. Peter's, and Michael Judge was known as death certificate number 1. So we were very grateful for St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church for serving as the first house of worship to help us at Ground Zero. So the cross stayed there for 5 years. On July 23rd, 2011, we relocated the cross from St. Peter's Church, from the exterior, and had a sacred solemn profession and brought it into the National 9/11 Memorial Museum. It was a beautiful ceremony. I mean, there were over 1,000 people were there. And I said, okay, after 10 years, my odyssey with the Ground Zero Cross has ended from September of 2001 and now till July of 2011. 2 days later, on my birthday, I found my odyssey was not over. It had a new beginning. I found on my birthday on July 25th, 2011, from a colleague of mine, Richard Shearer, that myself, the mayor of New York, the governor of New York, the governor of New Jersey, the 9/11 Memorial Museum, the Port Authority, and many others were being sued by a group called the American Atheist Association. It's a very small group of atheists, and they do not represent the clear goodness of atheists in general in the United States. They sued us because they felt it was a violation of church and state, because the money was involved to put it in there. And for 3 years we fought this lawsuit. What happened was it was filed in July of 2011. The U.S. Southern District, led by Judge Deborah Batts, she made her decision on this lawsuit on March 29th, 2013, which was ironically Good Friday. And at 3 o'clock at Good Friday, Judge Deborah Batts decided that the American Atheist Association had no grounds for this, and that the cross can remain within the museum. This was not coincidental. Good Friday, March 29th, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when Christians believed it was the time that's when Jesus Christ died on the cross. We believe the judge's decision was intentional in the timing, and we were very gratified for that. To be expected, the American Atheist Association gave an appeal to the Second Circuit Court here in Manhattan, and I attended it with many students and nurses from St. Francis College in Brooklyn, where I'm the chaplain, and we heard the arguments from both the atheist and for the defendants. And there was a pro bono attorney that represented the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and they were splendid in their arguments in front of the three judges. The three judges unanimously upheld the decision by Deborah Batts that was decreed on March 29th, 2013. So it was a beautiful, wonderful sense of catharsis for myself, fighting for this cross for 13 years. Because of this 13-year odyssey I had with the cross, I decided to write a book. And it's a very good book. I believe you'll like it for the season of Lent. Particular importance for Holy Week, especially if you need a book to reflect upon on Good Friday. I ask you to read this book, because it's not just a personal memoir about Father Brian Jordan, but it's a story about faith amid adversity. And we found strength, not just only as a bunch of individuals, but as a community of faith, for those who witnessed suffering, anxiety, and pain and death at ground zero, and now found the gift of the resurrection through the presence of the ground zero cross.